Was he a lifelong hoarder or a shrewd collector? The answer lies inside this salvage yard filled with rusty old cars.
Did you know how many cars Grandpa had?
The locals say it's a worthless eyesore. His grandson calls it an iron gold mine.
500, now 6,000.
Which is the truth? We're about to find out.
Sold it.
I'm Jamie Colby, and I'm just driving into Enid, Oklahoma, which is about 90 miles north of Oklahoma City. Population roughly 50,000. Right here in Enid, they have the third largest storage capacity for grain on the planet. But wedged in between Enid's silos lies the tale of a cantankerous legend who left his grandchildren with a very strange inheritance.
My name is Stuart Piontek, and in 2003, my brothers and sisters and I inherited something pretty unusual from my grandfather. His name was Oliver Jordan, and he died at 95. He was a child of the Dust Bowl. Grandpa would hold on to just about everything that passed through his life, whether it was a tin can, an automobile, a piece of copper wire.
And Oliver Jordan kept it all here for 60 years. This salvage lot was his home, his sanctuary, his Fort Knox.
Oh, hi.
Hi, Stuart.
Welcome to paradise.
I found it. The rusted old cars in this shed, some of them relics of the Roaring '20s, are a few of the more than 200 that Jordan accumulated over his lifetime. Born in 1908, Jordan was raised on a wheat farm, but his real interest was that fabulous new invention, the car.
Grandpa was around machinery all the time, and automobiles were just beginning to happen. He got interested, and it was just a lifelong passion.
Jordan grows up, gets married, and then at 34 years old, abandons his wife and 3 young kids for a 16-year-old girl in town.
When my mother and her brother and sister were still children, my grandfather left the family for another woman. Her name was Ruby, and that was quite a scandal. Everybody was hurt by it.
In 1946, Oliver buys a salvage yard in Enid where he and Ruby live and where he makes money, selling old cars and parts. Oliver runs the salvage yard successfully for 7 years. But then in 1953, he gets into a nasty argument with the town of Enid over zoning and regulations, 2 words he detests.
The city came in and told him he had to put in a bathroom and do some other things. And Grandpa just didn't like to be told what to do.
He was not a rule follower.
Yeah, he was like, "Then fine, I'll close the doors," and that's what he did.
Oliver continues to hoard old cars. He cuts himself off from most of his family and rarely lets another soul inside the shuttered salvage yard.
Pretty much everybody in this town would drive by Grandpa's property and see all these old cars sitting right there. And some people, they thought they were an eyesore, you know.
Enid native Brad Waken recalls venturing over to the old man's place as a very young car buff in the 1970s.
I walked across the street, and it was, "Mr. Jordan, I'm looking for a starter for a Continental 6-cylinder engine. Do you have one?" After a long pause, he basically said, "Well, it's going to be $50. Well, came back about a month later with my $50. He said, "Nope, $75. I learned a little bit of horse trading at that point in time.
As a boy, Stuart never gets to know Grandpa Oliver. Stuart's mom, Oliver's daughter, dies when Stuart is only 6, a tragedy that separates him further from his grandfather.
We would come to town to visit my grandfather, and Grandpa had all these cards out in front of his property. It's like a little boy's wonderland, and he had them protected with a fence and with big, mean dogs. We couldn't get past the dogs.
Did you ever wish that he spent more time with you?
You know,
were you curious about him?
Yeah, I was eager for the opportunity to get to know him.
After his mother's death, Stuart and his family move away. When Stuart graduates high school in 1984, he decides to take a summer road trip back to Enid.
I got a Greyhound bus ticket and went out to Enid on my own. He took me over to his shop, and for the first time, I got to spend some time with my grandfather.
And with all those cars. Sure, they look like heaps of scrap, but Stuart comes to understand this was his grandfather's pride and joy, his collection. Its centerpiece, these two Depression-era Cords.
Grandpa had a fascination with the Cord because it was the first car that had front-wheel drive, and they had done some really ingenious things under the hood.
After his high school road trip, Stuart heads out west for college and then launches a successful furniture business in San Francisco. Then, in the fall of 2000, a call from out of the blue sends Stuart scrambling back to Enid.
He opens the door, and he's covered from head to toe in feathers.
That's next.
But first, our strange inheritance quiz question. What was the lowest-priced, mass-produced American car? Is it the 1907 Curved Dash Oldsmobile, the 1925 Ford Model T Runabout, or the 1922 Stutz Bearcat? The answer when we return. So, what was the lowest-priced, mass-produced American car? It's B, the 1925 Ford Model T Runabout, at $260. It sold for $5 less than the 1924 model.
For half a century, cantankerous junkyard owner Oliver Jordan accumulates hundreds of old cars, some very rare and mostly intact, but all of them rusting as he grows old. Then, in the fall of 2000, his grandson Stuart gets a phone call that opens the door to a new relationship and to a strange inheritance.
Ruby, his companion of 60 years, had fallen off a ladder and broken her hip, and she was in the hospital. She called worried about Grandpa because he was back at the house, and he was 94 years old. And that was the open door.
And it took till his 90s, really.
Yeah, because of who he was. He didn't want to need anybody.
Stuart hops on a plane to Oklahoma, not knowing what to expect.
So here I knock on the door. He's 6'4", and even at 94, he's got quite a commanding presence. And he opens the door, and he's covered from head to toe in feathers. He and Ruby had a couple of dogs, and one of the dogs had torn up the feather bed. There was something about him that still just commanded respect, even covered in feathers.
Seeing Oliver in such a terrible state, Stuart decides to stay in Oklahoma for a while and take care of his grandfather.
I was getting to know my grandfather through these cars. He was so proud to be showing them to me, and me experiencing his life's work and his pride and joy.
To Stuart, two things become immediately clear. First, Oliver knows he doesn't have much time left. And second, he's worried about the fate of those cars.
At one point, he said, "Thank God for you, thank God for you." And I think he was so worried about what would happen to his things.
Stuart's no car expert, but he does his homework and confirms that the centerpiece of the whole collection is indeed those Cords from the 1930s, the ones he remembers from his high school road trip.
What'd the last Cord sell for?
I'm not sure, but maybe not more than 400 of these or 500 of these were ever made.
Best case scenario.
I'm thinking best case scenario restored is probably 300,000, 350 maybe.
Thoughts like that lead Stuart down a road that will take him more than a decade to travel and cost him plenty. Just for starters, he lays out tens of thousands of dollars to ship in secure containers and build a steel storage building to house the most prized cars.
It's his life's work, but also if these things are so valuable, why are they just rotting away here? You know, and someone has to step in and do something about it.
In August 2003, Oliver Jordan dies at the age of 95, leaving his enormous automobile collection to Stuart and his siblings.
The original windows that they would stick in the sides.
Stuart tells me this 1924 Roland touring car is one of his personal favorites. The model was popular among bootleggers during Prohibition.
So there's toggle switches on the dashboard where they would turn off the taillights if they were being followed by somebody.
To hide the booze.
That's right.
But these cars represent just a snippet of Oliver's vast collection.
I've never seen anything like this, Stuart. There's so many cars.
It's quite a strange thing to inherit, isn't it?
Before he dies, Oliver gives Stewart some business advice.
He said, now don't sell all those cars and parts all at once. You sell them one at a time because you'd make more money that way.
But after trying to sell a couple online, Stewart realizes it would take the rest of his life to sell them one by one. Turns out just getting the titles for all these old cars takes months.
You had to get title to every single one of these cars. They're from the 30s. How do you do that?
Well, let me show you.
First, you have to find the car's ID numbers.
Oh, my God, you can still read it.
Well, we had to polish it off, but we were able to actually get titles for the majority of the cars.
The years click by like odometer miles, and Stewart keeps spending more to authenticate and protect the old cars. A lot of plane trips from San Francisco and back, too. By 2013, he says he's invested $400,000 getting the collection primed for auction. Ready or not, it's time to sell.
Hey, Jamie.
Hi, how are you, Yvette?
Stewart contacts auctioneer Yvette Vanderbrink to appraise the collection. So, is Stewart sitting on a pile of junk or a potential gold mine?
There's about 220 of them. They're mostly American cars, and they're pre-war, which is pre-1942. Very rare cars because at the start of World War II, they started limiting production, and you could only get one from a ration coupon.
Stewart and Yvette make plans for a one-day auction right here on the salvage lot. Word begins to spread about Oliver Jordan's old treasures. Stewart soon learns that's not altogether a good thing.
We arrived at the property and found someone had cut through the fence and then cut a hole in the side of this building the size of a human body. And they sold over 250 antique radiators, tons of chrome parts, a lot of nice stuff.
The antique radiators alone are worth nearly $40,000. But the biggest loss for Stewart is the theft of Oliver's rare and beloved 1904 Harley-Davidson, possibly worth several $100,000.
So it really set us back, and we had to hire additional security, and we had to move the auction forward.
That entails some word-of-mouth advertising by him and some seat-of-the-pants hot rodding by me. You have this thing insured?
Yes, I do.
Oh, good thing. There's a tree right there. That's next.
Here's another quiz question for you. Which of these deceased celebrities' cars sold for the highest bid at auction? Is it Steve McQueen, Marilyn Monroe, or James Dean? The answer when we return. So, which of these deceased celebrities' cars sold for the highest bid at auction? It's the actor Steve McQueen. In 2013, his Ford GT40 sold for $11 million.
Stuart Piontek is racing to auction off his strange inheritance, hundreds of vintage cars. His grandfather's lifelong obsession has become Stuart's own. He's invested 13 years and $400,000 in the collection. I catch up with him at the Hot Rod Association rally in Oklahoma City.
Hi, my name's Stuart. Did you know my grandfather?
While Stuart works the crowd, I'm gonna see if I can get behind the wheel of one of these souped-up automobiles.
How you doing? Hey, I'm Jamie.
Hello, Jamie.
How are you?
Hello, I'm Stephen.
Tell me about this car.
Well, that's a 37 Chevrolet, so it's 77 years old, so I've had quite a bit of its
Part
life.
of the family?
Yes, it is.
Oh, my. I've just gotten the keys.
We can do that.
Let's go.
All right.
You have this thing insured?
Yes, I do.
Oh, good thing. There's a tree right there. All right, hold on. Woo-hoo! Now we're talking. This would work for me in New York.
Auctioneer Yvette Vanderbrink is here, too.
So, Yvette, you see these shiny red cars, and, I mean, you could tell there must be some value here, but some of them look like junk.
Yeah.
But they're not?
No, they're not junk. It's a different trend in the car collecting hobby now. Keeping that
That
look,
trend is
stamp
called
the door,
patina. It refers to the factory original paint that shows the ravages of time. Some car collectors relish that vintage barn find look and spray a clear coat of varnish on top to preserve it. That could be good news for the rarest cars Stewart has, those two Cords from the 1930s. But if you're like me, you're wondering what they might look like restored. I didn't have to go far to find out. Remember Brad Waken, who once tried to buy a starter from old Oliver Jordan? He's now a Cord aficionado. He spent over 30 years restoring this Cord. It's a stunning example of what a Cord looks like in all its glory.
We went through the engine, we painted it, we fixed the interior. It's something that we looked at restoring history and not just putting on a nice paint job and chroming everything.
Hey, now I'm gonna go 657. Now 7. Now 7.
On June 7th, 2014, it's finally the big day of the auction.
We're going to have fun and we're going to book, and I just killed 10 minutes.
Auctioneer Yvette Vanderbrink welcomes a crowd of at least 300 people.
Hope I covered everything for you. All right?
Stewart's sister, Starla, crosses her fingers.
It's been a lot of hard work. I hope that Stewart just, at least he gets back what he's put into it, and that my other siblings, that what they've put into it, they get back.
All right, guys. This was one of Mr. Jordan's favorite vehicles.
Stewart's put in $400 grand. Will he get it back?
$35,000.
I have $40,000.
$40,000.
That's next.
Now, back to Strange Inheritance.
The buzz over Oliver Jordan's antique car auction has brought collectors from all over the country to Enid, Oklahoma. Some are just looking to buy parts, but others are here with plenty to spend for just the right vehicle.
I came with a trailer and a pickup, and if I have to, I'll run back and get a bigger truck and a bigger trailer to haul more cars.
That 5.5 down 6. That's 666 down half it, 650.
You have to be quick to purchase in this game. These cars can go in less than a minute.
7,000, now 7,500. Sold it. 7,500, now 750, now 4. Sold it, sold it, sold it, sold it. $9,600.
People seem in good spirits, and things seem to be moving pretty well, so it's going pretty good.
Stewart's cautiously optimistic as Oliver Jordan's two beloved Cords are about to go up for bid.
Supercharge is first.
Stewart thinks they'd each be worth 6 figures if fully restored. But how much in this condition?
The 1937 Cord 812 Beverly Supercharged. This was one of Mr. Jordan's favorite vehicles. It's going to need every little piece restored. Okay, 35,000.
I have 40,000.
40,000. 40.
Yes!
Now 42 at 42,000. At 42.22 at 2 at 42,000. 42.5. Sold it. $42,000 going to New York.
What will the second Cord fetch?
Kara, what do you got?
I got 20,000.
20,000 and we're going. At 21,000. At 21,111 at 1. At 22 and a half and a half. At 22.5. At 22 and a half and a half. At 22.5. Sold it. 22,000.
It's over in seconds. The same anonymous telephone bidder pays $64,000 for both cars. Stewart says he's not disappointed.
In this condition, that's a great price for them, as much as we could have hoped for. And it's really great because they're going to move on.
After an emotional day, the grand total for this auction, $540,000. Subtract the $400,000 Stewart invested, and it's a profit of $140,000 to split with his siblings. Add in all that time the family invested in this strange inheritance, and it's no windfall.
So here we go.
Ooh, that's a good one.
All right.
Then again, watching the grandchildren of Oliver Jordan pop open the bubbly has to make you wonder, was their 13-year-old enterprise ever really about turning rusted iron into gold? Or was it about a different kind of alchemy, one perhaps that restores broken and brittle family ties into strong, lifelong bonds?
We lost our mother when we were rather young, and we didn't really get to know her parents that well, and so this brought us closer.
Would Grandpa, what would he say? He'd say, Stuart?
I think he'd say, I'm proud of you, you know?
Would that be important for you to hear from your grandfather?
Yeah, definitely. And that's really what it was about for me, doing right by him and by my family.
Stuart sold all of his grandpa's cars, and he regretted losing only one, the 1924 Roland touring car. It was a favorite of Prohibition bootleggers. And on auction day, an 86-year-old woman came just to see it. She explained that her grandfather had driven it to the hospital the day she was born and then sold it to Oliver Jordan. Of all the stories about this strange inheritance, this may have been Stuart's favorite. So Stuart asked the man that bought the touring car for $4,800 to let him know if he ever resold it. Stuart might want to buy that one back. I'm Jamie Colby for Strange Inheritance. Thanks so much for watching, and remember, you can't take it with you. Do you have a strange inheritance story you'd like to share with us? We'd love to hear it. Send me an email or go to our website, strangeinheritance.com.